So we're in 137a1, the Mishnah. Somebody had two babies to circumcise. אחד למול אחר השבת, ואחד למול בשבת. One was supposed to be circumcised on Sunday, and one on Shabbat. But he confused. ושכח ומלט של אחר השבת, בשבת he forgot, and he circumcised the one that was supposed to be circumcised on Sunday, a day before on Shabbat. Now in this case, he did not even perform a mitzvah because premature circumcision is not a mitzvah. So he basically desecrated Shabbat without the advantage of performing the mitzvah of circumcision. Therefore, the Mishnah says unanimously, chayav, he is liable to karet for that desecration of Shabbat. There's no mitzvah. The dispute is in another case where he circumcised on Shabbat a baby that was not supposed to be circumcised on Shabbat. However, he did achieve some mitzvah.
Why karet? He's sugay.
I know. Why karet? Yeah, he's. No. Chayav, no. Who says karet? Chayav, liable to chatat. No karet. Did I say karet?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So it's karet. You're right. Karet. Chatat, right. אחד למול בערב שבת ואחד למול בשבת. If he had one to circumcise on Friday and one on Shabbat, and he mistakenly circumcised the Friday one on Shabbat, here we have a dispute. ושכח ומלט של ערב שבת בשבת. Rabbi Eliezer mechayav chatat. Rabbi Eliezer here too says he's liable to chatat because he was not supposed to be circumcised on Shabbat. It's a mistake. The difference is that in the first case, he desecrated Shabbat without performing any mitzvah. In this case, at least, he performed the mitzvah because it's not premature. It's the 9th day. The problem is that circumcision, if it's not on the 8th day, does not override Shabbat. And this is the 9th day. This baby was supposed to be circumcised on Friday, and he did it on Shabbat. So Rabbi Eliezer says he's liable to chatat for the unjustified desecration of Shabbat. But for Rabbi Yoshua exempts him, so the Gemara will explain that since he performed the mitzvah, albeit not the choicest mitzvah, but he's not liable to chatat. Why? Stone. No, stoning is only for a deliberate act with witnesses and warning. Yeah, of course, he was not deliberate, he was inadvertent. You can ask Shai Oved. I guess it doesn't matter because it's the same mitzvah in both. Once the morning of the 8th day arrives, so it's the same obligation to circumcise both. Yeah, but it's not a greater mitzvah to circumcise a firstborn than a secondborn. But interesting to know what Shai Oved would say about this. Okay, there are two versions of the Mishnah. Rav Huna matnei chayav. Rav Huna has our version. Yeah, so there's a dispute about this. I think if circumcision was done prematurely, so they do cause some blood to flow. So Rav Huna has our version in the Mishnah, chayav, Rav Yehuda matnei patur. And now the Gemara explains both versions. Rav Huna matnei chayav, it's exactly the same version as in our Mishnah, the Tanya. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, lo nechleku Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yoshua. There's no dispute al mi shayu lo shnei tinokot, concerning one who had two babies, echad lemul b'Shabbat v'echad lemul achar Shabbat, one to circumcise on Shabbat and one to circumcise on Sunday. V'shachach u'malet shel achar Shabbat b'Shabbat, and he forgot and circumcised the Sunday one on Shabbat. Shu chayav, he is liable to karet, to chatat, because his action did not result in the performance of a mitzvah. He just desecrated Shabbat without any justification. Al manechleku, the case of dispute is al mishayu lo shnei tinokot. If he had two babies, echad lamul be'erev Shabbat, echad lamul b'Shabbat, one was supposed to be circumcised on Friday, ושכח ומלט של ערב שבת בשבת. So he circumcised him on Shabbat instead of Friday, which means on the 9th day instead of the 8th day. So even though such circumcision does not override Shabbat, however, he did perform a mitzvah. So Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatat. Rabbi Eliezer still renders him liable to chatat. Rabbi Yoshua poter. And what are the reasonings of their dispute? Ushnehem lo lemadua. They both learned it ela me'avodat kochavim, from the chatat for idolatry. Now, chatat for idolatry is the source, the role model for chatat liability. All other chataot, the characteristic of other chataot are derived from chatat for the sin of idolatry. So Rabbi Eliezer says, avodat kochavim, just like idolatry. Ma avodat kochavim, amar Rachmana lo tavid. Idolatry is something the Torah says not to do. V'chi avid mechayev, whoever does it is liable to chatat. Here too, achanami loshna, the Torah says not to circumcise a baby on the 9th day on Shabbat. There's no justification for such a desecration of Shabbat. If he did it, he's liable to chatat. Oh, that's what Rabbi Yoshua. Right, there's a positive outcome. Rabbi Yoshua says that, but Rabbi Eliezer doesn't look at that. He says, the Torah says not to do something, you're liable to chatat. Here too, he says not to do it, liable to chatat. The Rabbi Yoshua says exactly what you say. He says, hatav delav mitzvah, there, idolatry, if one worships an idol, he performs no mitzvah by doing that. Hacham is that here, in this mistaken circumcision, at least he achieved some mitzvah. So it's a kosher circumcision, yeah, even though it was done on Shabbat. So therefore, says Rabbi Yoshua, it's not comparable to chatat, which is brought for a sin that is completely a negative act. Here, there's a positive aspect to this act, and that's why he is not liable to chatat. And that's the halacha. Yeah, but it's right. Mitzvah ba'avera. So this is one version of this dispute, and Rav Yehuda has a different version. Rav Yehuda matnei patur, and he says the Tanya Amar Rabbi Meir lo nechleku Rabbi Eliezer veRabbi Yoshua. There's no dispute al mi shayu lo shnei tinokot, concerning one who had two babies, echad lamul be'erev Shabbat v'echad lamul b'Shabbat. If one was supposed to be circumcised on Friday, and he circumcised him mistakenly on Shabbat, v'shachachu malet shel erev Shabbat b'Shabbat, shu patur. According to this version, they both agree with Rabbi Yoshua of the previous version, that if he mistakenly circumcised the Friday one on Shabbat, and he actually performed the mitzvah, although was not supposed to be done, he's patur, he's exempt from chatat. Al man nechleku, what's the case of dispute? Al mi shayu lo shnei tinokot, if he had two babies, echad lamul achar Shabbat, echad lamul b'Shabbat, one to be circumcised on Sunday, one should have been circumcised on Shabbat, v'shachach umalet shel achar Shabbat b'Shabbat, and he circumcised the Sunday one on Shabbat. In this case, Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatat. Rabbi Eliezer says he's liable to chatat. He did not perform a mitzvah, because to circumcise a baby on the 7th day is not a mitzvah, and he desecrated Shabbat without any positive achievement. So he's liable to chatat.
The baby is technically circumcised, so there is not an achievement.
No, they're still obligated to cause some blood to flow on the 8th day, because it's a premature circumcision.
But can the baby regard himself as circumcised?
Technically, he's circumcised, but not halachically.
And he can't be circumcised unless there's one extra blood.
Yeah, so that's what should be done. Like for a convert, if somebody circumcised when he was a Gentile, and then he wants to convert, so they cause some blood to flow. Yeah. There's no. If it was done prematurely, it's not invalid. No, the circumciser, the one who did the act of the forbidden labor. No, of course, he's the one who's liable to chatat. Of course, the one who did the act of the labor, not the father. The mohel is supposed to find out in advance which baby should be circumcised on which day, and then.
Because the person has to
No. It's the circumciser. He's the one who performed the forbidden labor, so he is liable to chatat. Rabbi Yoshua exempts him, even though in this case he did not perform a mitzvah. He did not achieve, and apparently didn't achieve any positive outcome. Yet Rabbi Yoshua exempts him from chatat. And how come? So ushnehem lo lemadua ela me'avodat kochavim. Here too, according to this version, they derived it from the classic chatat for idolatry. Because Rabbi Eliezer savar ka'avodat kochavim. Rabbi Eliezer says chatat for Shabbat desecration is just like chatat for idolatry. Ma avodat kochavim amar Rachmana lo tavid. The Torah says not to do it. V'chiyavim v'chayav. If one did it, he is liable to chatat. Achanami loshna here too. If one circumcised a baby prematurely on Shabbat, he is liable to chatat. It's a forbidden act. There's no positive outcome. The moel, it's upon the moel to inquire, to find out if this circumcision justifies a desecration of Shabbat. Like the story I told, that somebody had a brit on Shabbat, he invited the guest and the moel came, and only on Shabbat he asked him how the baby was born. Because if it's born through a cesarean section, it does not override Shabbat. So the moel should have discovered it before Shabbat. But of course, it's his responsibility. He is doing the labor on Shabbat. It's on him to inquire if it's justified. If the baby is born through cesarean, there's no circumcision on Shabbat. On Sunday, yeah. As soon as possible, but it doesn't override Shabbat. Of course, if it's a Yom Tov, so then on the next day. Like this year, it's going to be Shabbat and Sunday. And Rabbi Yoshua says that here, in this case, there's no chatat liability. Why? He says, Atam lo tarid mitzvah. There, in the case of idolatry, one who worshipped an idol was not occupied with attempting to perform a mitzvah. He was occupied with a sin. So he's liable to chatat. But in this case, this mohel, this circumciser, he had confusion. He had two babies, one to circumcise on Shabbat, one on Sunday, and he was confused. He had some justification in his mind to do something on Shabbat, to do this circumcision on Shabbat. He knew that he had one baby at least to circumcise on Shabbat. He was occupied with attempting to perform a mitzvah. So there's some justification for this, and that's why he's not liable to chatat. He was occupied in trying to perform a true mitzvah, namely circumcising the infant that it was supposed to be circumcised on Shabbat. It was as a result of his preoccupation with the mitzvah that he mistakenly sinned by circumcising the one prematurely. According to Rabbi Yoshua, since the root of his error was different from that of the standard model of chatat, this case is considered dissimilar to the model of idolatry, so he's not liable to chatat. And there's even a third version of what is the case of dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, and that's in the following braita. Tani Rabbi Chia, Omer Haya Rabbi Meir, Lo nechleku Rabbi Eliezer veRabbi Yoshua. He says there's no dispute. Al mi shayu lo shnei tinokot, echad lamul be'erev Shabbat ve'echad lamul b'Shabbat. One was supposed to be circumcised on Friday, one on Shabbat. V'shachach u'malet shel erev Shabbat b'Shabbat shu chayav. If he circumcised the Friday one on Shabbat, he is liable. Says about this, there's no dispute. Even Rabbi Yoshua admits that he's liable for circumcising because it's a premature circumcision. I'm sorry, no, it's on the 9th day instead of the 8th day. So even though he did achieve a mitzvah, he's still liable to chatat according to this. Which two? Yeah, he did the wrong one on Shabbat, the Friday one. One Friday, one Shabbat. And he got the wrong one. Right. So for this, he's liable to. What's the previous case? Yeah, right. This is another version of the dispute. It's a different reasoning for this. It's a different explanation. Yeah, different perspective.
Let me get all the options. Except for the option that if it was supposed to be done after Shabbat, we did it on Shabbat that is Patur, because then the other side would be Kolshikin Patur, would be obvious. That's why we have only 3 options and not 4.
Oh, but this baita is kind of unclear, because on one side it says in the beginning that if he circumcised the Friday one on Shabbat, he is liable to chatat. But it says, Al manich leku, what's the case of dispute? Al mishayu lo shnei tinokot, echad lamul achar Shabbat, v'echad lamul b'Shabbat. And in case he circumcised the Sunday one on Shabbat, v'shachach umalet shel achar Shabbat b'Shabbat, so then Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatat. Rabbi Eliezer says, in this case too, he is liable to chatat. So Rabbi Eliezer is consistent. He says, in any case, the baby was not supposed to be circumcised on Shabbat, whether it's Friday or Sunday, and you mistakenly circumcised him on Shabbat, you're liable to chatat, regardless of whether it's premature or after the time. But for Rabbi Yoshua pater. Now Rabbi Yoshua's opinion is unclear, because if for circumcising the Sunday one on Shabbat, which is premature, he exempts one from chatat, in case he did not achieve any positive outcome, so how much more so should he exempt one who circumcised the Friday one on Shabbat, where at least there's some positive outcome that the circumcision is valid. So how come there he says one is liable for circumcising the Friday one on Shabbat, he's liable, and the Sunday one on Shabbat he's exempt? How come? And that's the question. Hashta Rabbi Yoshua Seifa, in the last case, the Loka Avid Mitzvah Pater, where he didn't perform any mitzvah, he circumcised him prematurely, there he says he's exempt. So Reisha, in the first case, the Ka'avid Mitzvah, where he did achieve a positive outcome, he circumcised him on the 9th day, Michayev, how come there he renders him liable? So the answer is that in this Baita, the reason for exemption from Chatat is different. It does not matter whether he achieved the mitzvah or not. What matters is, did he have a justification in his mind to perform a circumcision on Shabbat? So Amrei Devei Rabbi Yanai, so they explain, Reisha, the first case where he's liable to Chatat is Kegon Shekadamu Malet Shel Shabbat Erev Shabbat. He changed the babies. He circumcised the Shabbat one on Friday. Now he only had, and there's no mitzvah, of course, but what matters is that now on Shabbat he only had one baby to circumcise, and it's his responsibility to make sure that the one he circumcises on Shabbat is indeed the correct one. So if he circumcised the other one, the Friday one on Shabbat, he's liable to chatat. He had he should have made sure that there's justification for this circumcision on Shabbat. He was not supposed to have in his mind any justification for circumcision on Shabbat once he already circumcised the Shabbat one on Friday. But in the last case where Rabbi Yeshua exempts him, he says, the first case, in this case, the first case, the Shabbat is not any longer given to being overridden because he actually had no baby to circumcise on Shabbat. He already circumcised the Shabbat one on Friday, and that's it. There's no other baby he was supposed to circumcise on Shabbat. Therefore, there's no justification for this unnecessary desecration of Shabbat. But Seifa, in the last case, he had two babies to circumcise on Shabbat. One was actually rightfully should have been circumcised on Shabbat. So Nitna Shabbat Idachot. In there, the Shabbat is still given to being overridden since he is not yet circumcised, the Shabbat one. And therefore, Rabbi Yeshua exempts him because he did have some justification for this desecration.
Yeah, but I didn't really learn about Shabbat. Violating the Shabbat. The whole discussion before about you did a mistake, you didn't do the Shabbat, or you didn't do the Shabbat. That doesn't matter what you thought. You did it with Shabbat, it's 5 o'clock.
Right, so now we say, yeah, it's still shogeg, but because there's another consideration that if he had some justification for his act, so then he's not liable to chatat. It's a new another aspect which was not mentioned before, because but if there, let's say, what if a doctor has to go to a patient on Shabbat, pikuach nefesh, and then he finds out that actually there was no need. It was he's not liable to chatat because he had some justification to go. So here too, he He had in his mind, he had some reason. Yeah, so performing a mitzvah is also permitted on Shabbat, so it's an aspect of leniency. That's another question. So Amali Rav Ashi le Rav Kahana, Rav Ashi says to Rav Kahana, Reichanami, but in the first case also, if he mistakenly circumcised the Friday one on Shabbat, and now this specific Moel did not have any reason to think that he should have circumcised anyone else on this Shabbat, but still, Nitna Shabbat lidachot legabei tinokot de'alma, Shabbat is given to being overridden in regard to other babies in the world. I mean, there's probably another baby that should be circumcised on this day. So why is this not enough reasoning to justify this circumciser's act on Shabbat and to exempt him from Chatat? But the answer is, of course, that this specific person, for this specific circumciser, it was not given to being overridden. Nobody asked him to do any other circumcision on this Shabbat.
One of them was one of these.
He would be exempt.
Because he has other.
Right, because he has justification to desecrate this Shabbat for another one.
So if he had an obligation to another one, he'd be exempt from this one?
Yeah, if he has another baby that he should circumcise on this Shabbat, so then it's like a justified confusion. Sometimes confusion is justified.
For the others, he wasn't machalel. For this one, he was.
Right, but since he had another reason to think that this Shabbat is already like lenient in his eyes because he has a right to desecrate it, so for doing this one is also exempt from Chatat. Is paved with good intentions. Okay, and then the next Mishnah says that not always a baby is circumcised on the 8th day. Katan nimo lishmona, letish'ah, ולעשרה, ולאחד-עשר, ולשנים-עשר. לא פחות ולא יותר, not before the 8th day, and it should not take place after the 12th day. Why? So the Mishnah specifies, HaKeitzad, Kedarko, Lishmona, the normal circumstances, obviously the child is circumcised on the 8th day, even if it's Shabbat, no reason to change it. Nolad Leven Hashmashot, what if a baby is born during twilight? This is not in Shabbat, let's say between Sunday and Monday. So there's a doubt if he was born on Sunday or Monday. Twilight is a doubtful time, so he should not be circumcised next Sunday because there's a chance he was born on Monday. So therefore he should be circumcised on Monday, which is the 9th day from the Sunday where it's possible that he was born on. Nimol Tish'ah. Ben Hashmashot shel Erev Shabbat, if he was born during the twilight of the eve of Shabbat, so then there is indeed a chance he was born on Friday. There's also a chance he was born on Shabbat. But he cannot be circumcised neither on next Friday or next Shabbat, because on Friday he cannot be circumcised because it might be premature, there's a doubt. On Shabbat he may not be circumcised because he might have been born on Friday. So then it's the 9th day. So he can only be circumcised on Sunday, which is the 10th day from the day he was possibly born, from the Friday. Yom Tov le'achar Shabbat, if there's a Yom Tov on Sunday, so then he cannot be circumcised on that Sunday as well, because circumcision not in the 8th day does not override Yom Tov. So nimol le'achad-asar, then he's circumcised on Monday, which is the 11th day from the Friday he was possibly born on. Shnei yamim shel Rosh Hashanah, if there are 2 consecutive days of festival, Rosh Hashanah, let's say Sunday, Monday, so then nimol l'shneim-asar, then he's circumcised on the 12th day, which is Tuesday.
Premature circumcision is much worse than a day later.
Of course, because premature, there's no mitzvah. And a day later, the mitzvah is performed. The 8th day is the beginning of when it can start to be circumcised.
How much time is considered Ben Hashmashot for this?
So Ben Hashmashot, nowadays in Israel, they say it's 13 and a half minutes. From sunset, 13 and a half minutes is the time of doubt. So during that period, there's a question. Katana chole, if there is a sick baby, should not be circumcised until he becomes healthy. Even if he's not dangerously ill, we postpone the circumcision for fear that in his weakened condition, it might endanger his life. And now Shmuel was a doctor, says that if there was a serious illness, so he cannot be circumcised as soon as he recovered, there's a need to wait a week, 7 days. Amar Shmuel, if the fever has left him, we give him all 7 days from the time of his recovery before circumcision. He should not be circumcised before 7 days pass in a healthy condition. And now comes an inquiry, do we require an interval of 7 24-hour period? Let's say the fever left him noontime or afternoon, let's say 4 p.m. So do we require now to count 7 times 24 hours and he can only be circumcised on the 7th day at 4 p.m. and not before? Or maybe in the morning of that day he could already be circumcised. Yeah, this is, I'm not sure if even a doctor could tell you precisely if these few hours matter. It's a halachic definition. Now here the Gemara remains in a doubt. There's no clear proof. But halacha is that we do require 7 full 24-hour periods. And that's why sometimes you can have a circumcision at the end of the day.
Because nowadays, you did a model or a doctor decide that the baby is ready to have the bris milah now.
Yeah, so if there was a serious illness, you must wait 7 full days. 7. Yeah, of course. That's the halacha. But it's only in the case of a serious illness. Like Moshe Feinstein speaks about what's called blue babies. There was a blue babies, they have to change all their blood. And he was asked, when could their circumcision be done? He says, if they have to change all their blood, that's obviously a serious illness. So only 7 days, 7 times 24 hours after that procedure was done, they can be circumcised.
Okay, that's like a continuous kind of a disease form, like scarlet fever or something, which goes on and on.
And he never recovers?
Maybe he does at some point, not quite a while.
No, there must be 7 consecutive days without fever. If there's fever, he cannot be circumcised. They speak about jaundice, if there's a need to wait.
In England, the baby jaundice, they wait 3 days.
3 days?
Yeah, I think it's got to do. Actually, with the law, the government.
Because here, jaundice is not considered a serious illness. It's a natural thing that Billy Rubin goes. Okay. There's a certain level of the bilirubin, and once he reaches that level, they immediately can be circumcised. It's not considered a serious illness. It's a natural phenomenon that. Tashma, there is a braita that says that the Tani Luda, Yom Avra'ato, the day of his recovery, Yom Ivaldo, is the same as the day of his birth. So if there's such a comparison, we can perhaps learn from there that my love, my Yom Ivaldo, lo ba'inan me'etlet, just like in the case of the day of his birth, we do not require an interval of 7 24-hour periods before circumcising him. Even if a baby was born in the afternoon, on the 8th day, he could be circumcised early in the morning. Once the 8th day arrives, you don't wait for the same hour that he was born in. So, Af Yom Avrato, apparently, the day of his recovery too, lo ba'inan me'etlet, we do not require the precise hour. But the Gemara rejects this. Lo, we can say that Adif Yom Avrato, Ivaldo, perhaps the day of his recovery is even greater than the day of his birth. The Yom Ivaldo lo ba'inan me'etlet, for with the day of his birth, we do not require 24-hour times 7 from the day, the moment he was born. He could be circumcised early in the morning. But day of his recovery, we do require precisely 7 times 24 hours, and that's the halacha. Right, here there's a doubt, but in Masechet Yevamot, the Gemara seems to say obviously that we do require that interval, so that's the halacha. And then the last Mishnah in this chapter is not related so much to Shabbat, it's actually the definition of a valid circumcision. These are the shreds that impede the validity of the circumcision. If there's flesh that covers the larger part of the corona, the ridge surrounding the membrum, from which, how do you say it? Membrane. It's with an M at the end.
Yeah.
With an N? Even though it's spelled with an M? Look at footnote 45. It says surrounding the membrum. It's a Latin word. Okay, from which it tapers to a point. Some define atara corona as the entire glans. Okay, so and if there's still some flesh left, which does cover the larger part of the corona, whether it's in the height or in the circumference, if that person is a kohen, he may not eat truma because an uncircumcised kohen is disqualified to eat truma. Now there's also a case of marit ayin, of appearance. If the child was fleshy is like obese, and it gives the appearance of being uncircumcised even after the foreskin was removed. So metakno, that must be repaired, mipnei marit ayin, rectified, because of the appearance of wrongdoing. You have to cut the fat. Yeah, that's the case. If there's a case of a child who's too fat and that fatness covers, you have to cut the fat to there must be an appearance of a circumcised person.
So the footnote, he said that even during the Milah, if the mole sees that he's a fat baby, he could already
do it in the first place.
do it because he knows that that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, marit ayin. If as a result of the child's plumpness, the excess flesh above the foreskin hangs down and appears to cover the corona after the foreskin is removed, the circumcisers should trim away the excess flesh so that the child should not appear to be uncircumcised. He has extra work. And then the Mishnah finally says, Mal velo para, if he's circumcised but did not uncover the circumcision, it's as if he did not circumcise, and this refers to a membrane under the foreskin. After he cuts the foreskin, there's a membrane that he also must remove. Without removing that, it's as if he did not perform the circumcision. Tosfot wonder, why did the Mishnah even need to say that? Because we already said that if the corona is not exposed, circumcision is invalid. So this requirement is essential.
That's why today,
in advance, like this clamp. Right. Puts it there, and then you'll just need to cut, and that's all. Yes. So it does it in one act. Right. It's on YouTube. I don't know. Okay. אמר רבי אבינה, אמר רבי ירמיה בר אבא, אמר רב, בשר החופה את רוב גובהה של התרה. This essential shreds that impede the validity of the circumcision is any flesh of the foreskin that covers the larger part of only the height of the corona. Don't assume that the Mishnah deems the circumcision invalid only when the remaining foreskin covers the majority of the circumference of the corona. Rather, even if it covers only the narrow part of the circumference, as long as it covers the majority of the height of the corona, it's invalid. Okay, if the child was fleshy, or another word is plump. Amar Shmuel, katana mesurbal bevasar. If there's an infant who is thickly coated with flesh appears to cover the corona after the foreskin is removed. So רואים אותו. כל זמן שמתקשה ונראה מעול, when his membrum, it says, Latin, is erect. And in this state the flesh spreads outward. He appears circumcised, it's okay. אינו צריך למול, ואם לאו, but if not, צריך למול. He must be circumcised again. Just for the appearance. Yeah. B'matnita Tana, the Braita says a slightly different version, and the Gemara explains what's the difference between the two versions. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, katana mesurbal bevasar. If there's a baby who's thickly coated with flesh, ro'in oto, kol zman shemitkashe ve'eino nireh ma'ul, when the membrum is erect, he does not appear circumcised, tzarich lemulo. He must be circumcised again. Ve'im lav, otherwise, eino tzarich lemulo. Now, what's the practical difference between the two versions? A case where to some extent he appears circumcised, but to some extent he does not appear circumcised. So both Shmuel and the Braita deal with only one case in specific terms. Shmuel specifies the case in which the child appears circumcised, and then, so according to Shmuel, the child must appear circumcised to avoid further cutting. In all other cases, including partial appearance, a second incision is necessary. But according to the Braita, there's no need for, in such a case, for a second incision.
So we don't go by the way it looks in non-erect state.
Right. So what matters is when it's erected, if then it looks okay, that's fine. Mal velo parat. And now there's the blessings of the circumcision. Tanura Banan, Hamal Omer, the circumciser says, Asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav etzivanu ala milah. Avi Ben Omer, Asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav etzivanu leachniso bivrito shel Avraham Avinu. העומדים שם אומרים, those who stand there say, כשם שנכנס לברית, כך ייכנס לתורה, לחופה ולמעשים טובים. I think it says both blessings, yeah. והמברך אומר, there's another one who recites a blessing, אשר קידש ידיד מבטן וחוק בשערו שם, וצאצאיו חתם באות ברית קודש, על כן בשכר זאת, אל חי חלקנו צורנו, צווה להציל ידידות שערינו משחת, למען בריתו אשר שם בבשרנו, ברוך אתה השם, קוראת הברית. So these are common blessings that are famous, but now there are two other blessings that one is not so common and one nowadays is at all never recited. Hamalet Hagirim, a special blessing for circumcising converts. Omer, Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Asher Kiddushanu B'Mitzvotav Etzivanu Ala Milah. So that's the conventional blessing. And then V'Hamevarech Omer Asher Kiddushanu B'Mitzvotav Etzivanu Lamul Et Hagirim Ule'atif Mehem Dam Brit. שאלמלא דם ברית לא נתקיימו שמיים וארץ, שנאמר אם לא בריתי יומם ולילה חוקות שמיים וארץ לא שמתי, ברוך אתה השם קוראת הברית. That's a special blessing for circumcision of a convert. Yeah, they say it. But not too many people attend such a rare circumcision, so not so...
When you do a convert, it's usually an older age. Still the same kind of Brit Milah they're doing?
Yeah, the same procedure. Unless the convert is already circumcised when he was a Gentile, so then they just need to draw some blood and then... Yeah, I think they could. They could do some anesthetics. I'm not sure how they do it. I guess local. Yeah. A what? I guess so. I'm not sure how they do it. I think they don't do it. I think they do it local, not.
I was working actively in Hadash. There was a day when they did Brito. All Russians would come and needed circumcision. All adults. They had actually a surgeon who operated close to Illinois. He would do the operation, and at the same time, he was really doing the circumcision.
So the surgeon did the anesthetics and the
Yeah, he did the injection, the local anesthesia.
and the Moel did the cutting.
But he was both, you're saying, right? You're saying the surgeon was both?
Yeah.
No, there was a Moel there. It says.
Surgery.
The surgeon himself was a Moel. No, I think today they do it much younger. They do it, I think, a few months. So all the Jewish Moalim, they practice on Arabs.
Plus, they tried to schedule the look they did that day. Actually, also the time was conservative. So anybody who can participate didn't have to fast.
So they can drink some.
Yeah, right. Much more than they told us, so we don't fast.
Okay. Amalet Avadim, so there's a special blessing for circumcision of a Canaanite slave that becomes obligated in mitzvot. אומר אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו על המילה, והמברך אומר אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו למול את העבדים ולהטיף מהם דם ברית, שאלמלא דם ברית חוקות שמיים וארץ לא נתקיימו, שנאמר אם לא בריתי יומם ולילה חוקות שמיים וארץ לא שמתי, ברוך אתה השם כורת הברית. הדרן הלך רבי אליעזר דמילה, הדרן הלך רבי אליעזר דמילה, הדרן הלך רבי אליעזר דמילה. Not necessarily. Like in Brit today, the Moel does the act of cutting, and somebody else recites the blessing. Asher Kiddush Yadid Mi Beten. So this too could be somebody else with a cup of wine. Ala Milah, the Moel says. But then the other blessing, somebody else recites. Could be anyone. The Moel could also say that, but could be somebody else. Yeah, the father or somebody else. Yeah. So now the next chapter is also Rabbi Eliezer, but it begins with the topic of making an oil, a tent on Shabbat, temporary oil. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Tolin et ha-meshameret b'Yom Tov. We may suspend a strainer on Yom Tov. Now this is a big novelty because to suspend a strainer is actually like making a tent, a temporary tent. It's a strainer through which wine is poured to filter out its dregs. It's like a porous stack whose bottom comes to a point. The bottom of the stack is placed into a container. Yes? Oh, so that's a good question. So there are two aspects of this thing. One aspect is about making this oil, this tent, temporary tent. So that the Gemara deals with today. And there's another aspect of the labor of selecting, of sifting, borer. So with that the Gemara deals tomorrow. But today we're dealing just with the aspect of suspending it and making a temporary tent. Okay, but it's still above a vessel, and it creates like a tent. If there's a tefach, height of a tefach, yeah, so it's already a problem. So although suspending such a strainer constitutes making a temporary tent, an act normally forbidden even on Yom Tov, certainly on Shabbat, Rabbi Eliezer permits it on Yom Tov, as the Gemara will explain. On Shabbat he says you cannot suspend it, but v'notnin latluya b'Shabbat, you can pour into a suspended strainer even on Shabbat. And certainly on Yom Tov, the Gemara will deal with that tomorrow. The sages are more stringent, and they say entolin et ha-meshameret b'Yom Tov. There's a prohibition to even suspend it on Yom Tov, and certainly to pour into it on Shabbat. Ve'notnin latluya b'Shabbat. Aval notnin latluya b'Yom Tov. You can pour into a suspended strainer on Yom Tov. So this the Gemara will explain. No, if there's a tefach height, then it might be a question. But if you close it, and that's not an oil. Oil is tefach by tefach at a height of a tefach. Yeah, that's an oil. So then it's not an oil. Now, of course, it puts it to a sift, like sift the wine. Yeah, it doesn't matter how large it is. If it's a tefach, the height of a tefach, it's called an oil. What, to sift? No, it's the same labor. So if you select the good from the bad from the good, whatever it is. So now the Gemara wonders on Rabbi Eliezer. It says, Rabbi Eliezer we know from before that is much more stringent in this matter of temporary tent. Rabbi Eliezer, and he says that one is not even permitted, even on Yom Tov, to add a temporary tent onto an existing tent. So would he permit it in the first place to make the entire tent? How come the tent? We had a Mishnah not long ago. It was page 125. Concerning the window shutter. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Bizman shekashur v'tali, only if the shutter is attached to the building with a rope and also suspended, only then you can use it on Shabbat, because then there's no appearance of even adding to something to a temporary tent. And without this, you cannot use it. According to Rabbi Eliezer, even temporary construction, such as placing an unattached shutter over a skylight window, is rabbinically forbidden because of its similarity to building a permanent structure, which is biblically forbidden. He permits shuttering a skylight window only if the shutter is attached to the skylight and never rests on the ground. Then it's viewed as already part of the building, no problem. The sages there are more lenient. And what's the explanation of this dispute? They all agree that a temporary tent, a temporary structure may not be done on Yom Tov even, and certainly on Shabbat. The point of dispute is to add on an existing temporary structure. Even on Yom Tov, Rabbi Eliezer says not to add anything to the temporary tent, and certainly on Shabbat. You can add to it on Shabbat and certainly on Yom Tov. So they say in the footnote that although Rabbi Eliezer forbids adding a temporary oil to an existing oil both on Shabbat and Yom Tov, his ruling is more novel in regard to Yom Tov than the Shabbat. So he rules that we may not make a temporary addition even on Yom Tov and certainly not on Shabbat. So how come here in this Mishnah he permits to even suspend the strainer in the first place on Yom Tov, which is creating a tent, not just even adding to it? So how could he permit it? The answer is that specifically a strainer he permits, not any temporary tent. In general, he prohibits to make a temporary tent, not even to add to an existing temporary tent. But if you talk about a strainer, which is used for food, beverages purposes, so in that he's lenient. Rabbi Eliezer savar like Rabbi Yehuda, he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya, en ben Yom Tov leShabbat, ela ochel nefesh bilvad. One opinion is that only food may be prepared on Yom Tov. That's the only difference, the only leniency in Yom Tov over Shabbat. Rabbi Yehuda matir af machshirei ochel nefesh. Rabbi Yehuda permits even the preliminaries of food preparation. So that's why Rabbi Eliezer, who holds like Rabbi Yehuda, permits to suspend the strainer because it's a preliminary of food. Right. It seems like Rabbi Eliezer in general holds like the preliminaries are tantamount to the end goal. Shechita is obviously permitted according to all. No, that's the food itself. Yes? No, the usual purpose is to strain the wine. It's for the usual purpose. No, the tent is done by the wine. It's not the intention just to make a tent. The intention is to use it to strain the wine. And the question is, by suspending it, you, by the way, also make a tent, which is supposed to be forbidden. Yeah, of course. It's not the intention to make a tent. But since unavoidably a tent is made, so it should not be done. The question is, how can we say that Rabbi Eliezer follows Rabbi Yehuda? So far, we only heard Rabbi Yehuda being lenient אלא במכשירים שאי אפשר לעשותם מערב יום טוב. Rabbi Yehuda only permit on Yom Tov such preliminaries that could not have been done before Yom Tov. For example, if a knife broke on Yom Tov, you couldn't have done it before, so he permits you to repair the knife or to make a knife on Yom Tov if you couldn't have done it before. But such a strainer which you could have suspended before Yom Tov, Rabbi Yehuda does not permit such preliminaries. במכשירים שאפשר לעשותן מערב יום טוב מי שמעת עלי. So how can we say Rabbi Eliezer agrees with Rabbi Yehuda? The answer is that the Rabbi Eliezer adifa mit Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Eliezer's leniency is even greater than Rabbi Yehuda's leniency. Even though Rabbi Yehuda only permits such preliminaries that could not have been done from before Yom Tov, Rabbi Eliezer permits even preliminaries that could have been done before to do them on Yom Tov. No, Rabbi Eliezer permits even if you could have done it before. He permits it anyway. You can ask, what would Rabbi Yehuda say about this? According to Rabbi Yehuda, who only permits preliminaries that could not have been done before Yom Tov. So if you had enough wine, so you didn't think you would need it, and then something on Yom Tov, your wine spilled, and you now need another wine. So this is something you could not have done before. You never knew. So you would permit it. Yeah. Anyway, Allah doesn't follow that, so it doesn't matter, because Allah is that preliminaries are not permitted on Yom Tov. Even preliminaries that could not have been done before, there's no permission to do them on Yom Tov. I mean, just the food itself. Okay, I think we can continue tomorrow. That's